There's no song for this morning and no poem. So once again, welcome. And October is a month for study of Karma Yoga, a spiritual path leading to the abandonment of selfishness. The abandonment of selfishness, consider that. As a karma yogi, you practice offering your actions and their results, as well as your perceptions, thoughts, and feelings to the divine presence. Even before fully knowing this presence, you hold firmly to the belief that the presence is within each person or other living being that you interact with or serve. Working and abiding in this spirit, you are increasingly able to release attachment to your activities and their results. This yields the freedom and contentment promised by Karma Yoga. Just a brief little, very potent promise by Sri Krishna. Even a little practice of this yoga, even a little practice of this yoga will save you from the terrible wheel of rebirth and death. Those are Sri Krishna's words in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2. So this morning's talk on the subject of Karma Yoga is titled Self-Discovery, Self-Actualization, Self-Realization. Self-realization is one way to talk about the goal of all spiritual practices. You can think of progress toward realization in 3 steps. First, self-discovery. What does it mean to be fully human? If you are bold, you begin to find this out during your student years and the early part of your householder life, up to about age 30. It's a time of exploration, definition, adventure. If you're blessed to be a spiritual aspirant, it's also a time of breaking through inner boundaries and beginning to feel the living presence that animates you. And let me explain what I mean by saying, if you're blessed to be a spiritual aspirant, there's nothing compulsory about being a spiritual aspirant. It's an invitation of the divine within ourselves to go beyond what we are. So we're invited, and that invitation, of course, is a great blessing. We can cooperate or not. The invitation is continuous. It's there and continuing all the time. We may not hear it. If we don't hear it, as long as you're not harmful to yourself or others in the world, no harm, no foul. It's not compulsory to be a spiritual aspirant. It is, of course, devoutly to be wished, because in that way lies freedom. But there's nothing compulsory about it. So if you are blessed to be a spiritual aspirant, this time of self-discovery is also a time of breaking through inner boundaries and beginning to feel the living presence that animates you. Next, self-actualization. In this phase, you bring the talents and attributes you have discovered and the spiritual treasures you are finding to ever greater manifestation. From about age 30 to age 60, you unfold your career and also may have a successful marriage and bring up 1 or more children. Together, these are your swadharma. This is a very demanding and challenging period of your life. As Sri Ramakrishna said, a householder leading a spiritual life is the true hero. And then finally, self-realization. Sometime during that period of self-actualization, after you have been practicing spiritual disciplines for a number of years, you start to realize the life you're living is merely the surface appearance of what you truly are. You become aware that your outward self, no matter how accomplished, how successful, is merely an expression of and evidence for a far greater being that lives within you, who empowers all your activities, your thoughts, your experiences. You begin to think of yourself as that living presence. You begin to think of yourself as that living presence and to know your true original nature. This morning, we'll explore and discuss these 3 steps in more detail. And because I don't want you to have to hold your questions and comments until the end, because each step is something that you might have questions or comments about, we'll take time for comments and questions at the end of the description of each step. So we'll begin. During the youthful time of self-discovery, finding out what the world has to offer takes up a good deal of your attention. All of us can remember clearly, being a teenager and moving from that teenager world where we're still protected, we're still dependent on our parents and on others for the things of life. We're not on our own in any real sense. Sometime around our early 20s to age 25, we move out of that phase. And it's then that we confront what the world is and what it has to offer us and what its dangers are. We find this out by experience. So we learn as we continue our education or begin to enter the workforce, have our own place to live rather than living with our parents, becoming less dependent on others, more involved with our friends and the ones we care about, independent of our family. Not that we leave our family behind, but they're no longer as central as they were. This is the time of self-discovery. For most of us, if we are spiritual aspirants, this also means first discerning, then actively working to curb the many. Now, if we're spiritual aspirants, this is not, as I said, compulsory, and this is not instruction for you. This is just what will happen if you're blessed to be a spiritual aspirant. You may take it as instruction if you like, but it's not meant to be something that, this is not dogma. This is not something that must be. So for most of us, if we're spiritual aspirants, this time of self-discovery also means first discerning, then actively working to curb the many self-centered tendencies that keep us at odds with the world. When you are harmful to others or the environment, deceitful, greedy, overly sensual, or covetous, you also must be, to one degree or another, always anxious, on guard. You're busy making sure, and this, just think about how it was or how it is for you during that time. You're busy making sure that you have the advantage in every situation and seeking to satisfy one more pressing desire. Living this life of the prodigal child, and for those of you who know the parable, Christ's parable of the prodigal child, this will be meaningful. Living this life of the prodigal child may be fun for a while in its way, yet it is ultimately self-defeating for a devotee. Why? Because calmness of mind is impossible. When you're always on guard, when you're always trying to seek to be in control of the situation, when you're always restlessly trying to satisfy another desire, a calm mind is impossible. Calmness of mind is impossible when you're in that state of being. A calm mind is essential for spiritual progress, not to mention an immeasurably great aid in becoming self-confident, self-determined, and self-sufficient, which is the goal of that time of self-discovery, to become self-confident, self-determined, and self-sufficient. Yet, all this is difficult, no doubt. You are learning what really motivates you and gaining some control of your left mind, that difficult servant who is needed to achieve success in our dualistic world. And if you want to know what I mean by that, read Jill Bolte Taylor's book, My Stroke of Insight. Any of you who would like to read that book, just email me, I'll send you a PDF copy. It's absolutely, you'll understand so much what I mean by you're learning what really motivates you and gaining some control of your left mind, that difficult servant who is needed to achieve success in our difficult world. Gaining control of your left mind is a little like asking a wild horse to tame itself. Just think, we need the left mind to control the left mind. So it's like asking a wild horse to break itself to the saddle, which is why we need the blessing and cooperation of our inner guide, the Atman. And this, if you're a spiritual aspirant, you'd really discover this in this time of self-discovery, this time of self-definition. When you move into the self-actualization phase as a devotee, spiritual practice probably will deserve more of your attention. This practice focuses on your internal world. The self-discovery period is necessarily more focused on your external reality. What is it out there in the world? How does it affect me? How do I affect it? How do I be self-sufficient, self-determined, self-controlled? So when you move into the self-actualization phase as a devotee, spiritual practice will probably deserve more of your attention. This practice focuses on your internal world of body, mind, and spirit. Ideally, as a spiritual aspirant, you will make daily determined efforts to eliminate all forms of inner and outer impurity. Now, the reason for doing this, as you discover, is simply because they're impediments, they're limitations. It's not about being right or wrong. It's what is it that smooths the path for me? What is it that makes the path more difficult? So you make daily determined efforts to eliminate all forms of inner and outer impurity. You become ever more content with the circumstances of your life. And for those of us who are pursuing this path in the self-actualization, this probably means being less ambitious for worldly success. You may actually pray to the divine presence, simplify my life, make my life less demanding, that I have less in the way of responsibility and less in the way. It doesn't mean that you don't actively serve others, but it isn't that this is a duty. It's something that you do because you know it's good for you and for the person you're serving. But you may actually pray that your duties in the world may be simplified so that you have more time to focus on your spiritual practice. You make daily determined efforts to you make daily determined efforts to prefer the good over the pleasant as the choices are offered to you. The good is that which leads you forward. The pleasant, at best, will keep you on the level. You'll simply march in place, or at more disadvantageously, it may actually pull you down. It may be pleasant, but it will pull you down. So you practice what in Sanskrit is called viveka and then vairagya. Viveka is discrimination. What is the difference between the good and the pleasant? And I will release the pleasant and replace it with the good. And at the end of this talk, I'll tell you where to find very, very detailed definitions of all this. You make daily efforts to learn from the sacred texts, from the scriptures, from the teachings of the great saints, and so on. You make daily efforts to learn from them, and using what you see in that mirror of the scriptures and the saintly testimony, you look at your own weaknesses and mistakes and see, how can I correct them? How can I be more like what is taught in the scriptures and by the saints? And here is the heart, here is the essence of Krishna's Karma Yoga. You offer every aspect of your life. You offer every aspect of your life and all it contains, including the results of your spiritual practices, to the divine presence. Now, if you want to know what is meant by that, read chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita. And then start at the beginning and read it again until you feel like you've assimilated what it is that Krishna is saying about offering every aspect of your life and all it contains, including the results of your spiritual practices, to the divine presence, which of course in the Gita is defined as Krishna. Your understanding of the divine presence, your chosen ideal, may not be Krishna, and that's fine. Whatever aspect of the divine is at the center of your spiritual practice is just fine. As you come to understand that the living presence is you yourself, this prayer may become a favorite. It is a sincere plea for the blessing and cooperation of your inner guide, the Atman. You are the source of infinite energy. Fill me with that energy. You are the source of infinite strength. Endow me with that strength. You are the source of infinite courage. Inspire me with that courage. You are the source of infinite fortitude. Grant me that fortitude. I said we'd stop at the end of the self-discovery for comments and questions, and then forgot my promise. So let's stop now. And you can ask questions about or make a comment, and please do, about either of these two steps before we go on to self-realization, self-discovery, anything at all from anyone about self-discovery, a comment, a question. This is how we do this together. This is how we learn to practice spiritual discipline together. How we share with one another.
May I comment?
Of course, Uma.
Okay. When I read this subject, self-discovery, self-actualization, self-realization, I began to think, what could be the difference? Otherwise, you will not place it in the order that you put that. And thinking, from my own observation and study until now, I felt that the first stage of self-discovery probably begins with a need inside you to question everything, to inquire, to explore. But all these efforts of knowing, inquiring, is intellectual in that stage. You try to explore sources by reading, by asking questions, by experimenting. That to me, I thought, and it very much aligns with what you said, exploring self. But the second stage of self-actualization is what it is, making it actual, means manifesting or realizing in practical sense in life by, as you say, prayers. You do practice every day or spend some time to not think about the mundane things in life, but the real things. So that's where you move a notch ahead, a notch higher. And then you are going to talk about self-realization. But speaking about these three stages, Brother Shankara reminded me of what I learned from Dr. Fowler, my PhD advisor, who has written an excellent book called Stages of Faith. And it's very, very profound how he interprets faith, very much like our Vedanta idea of inner self-realization. And there in the third stage, he puts what I can compare is self-discovery stage, in which you are young, you are inquisitive, you are youthful. So you begin to go everywhere and look, what is that? What is that? Why is that? So that's where it begins. And then you come to self-actualization, which is a very interesting stage that, okay, let me try now to experiment and practice what I'm seeking. And that applies to Gandhiji also. The entire London period where he went to study, or become a lawyer, that was that stage in which he was groping as if in the dark. And when he came back to India, that is where the real hunger for spirituality started to manifest. So I'm very thankful that you took up this subject of, analyzing these three stages. And I'm very eager to know the third stage of self-realization.
Well, thank you, Uma. And you're right in all you said, particularly that impulse in the stage of self-discovery.
Yes.
For inquisitiveness.
Yes.
It is the first impulse of the spiritual aspirant. Yes. What is all this?
Yes. Yes.
What in the world is all this? How can it possibly be, for a start?
Yes.
And so you begin to, as you say, seek explanations.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, as you say, as you go on to self-actualization, you make some sense of it. And you begin to come to some conclusions and get some guidance that's meaningful to you. And So you begin to make it a reality, what you've learned. You assimilate it. So thank you. Anyone else? Anything else? This is wonderful.
Thank you.
A question, a comment about self-discovery or self-actualization?
I guess I have a comment.
Yes, Marla.
Part of me wonders in all of this, they seem to stem from circumstances that are relatively stable, that people who live in extreme survival types of situations or trauma or, you know, disasters, how do they even begin this process?
They do not, Marla, as a general rule. As it said, there is no religion on an empty stomach. And so this is why in India, the Ramakrishna order is absolutely dedicated, and I mean dedicated, to making things better for people so that they can begin the process of becoming self-sufficient and masters of their lives. So they work very hard against disaster relief, famine relief, village education, medical services, free medical services, everywhere provided, everywhere they possibly can. And because their integrity is so great, they're highly trusted by the Indian government, who often gives them millions and millions of rupees to use for disaster relief or famine relief or any number of other purposes that are necessary, particularly in an immediate sense. Why don't we do that here? Vivekananda said, no, here there are already plenty of organizations dedicated to these services. You, if you wish to serve, join one of those organizations and offer your services through one of those organizations. But the emphasis of Vedanta here in the West should be on God realization. And that's what we're going to talk about next, what Vivekananda had to say about that. He said, I have a mission to the West, as Buddha had a mission to the East. And it was to teach what I'm about to talk about. So as we know, there are such an abundance of 501c3s, tax-exempt service organizations that address practically every need that human beings have. So we can put our emphasis on that for service. If we love animals, there's PETA, there's the Humane Society. If we want to help people who have a particular disease, there is an organization that addresses that disease. Cancer, kidney disease, hemophilia, just you name it. There is an organization. So there's no reason, as Vivekananda said, the West is very good at organizing and very good at doing these kinds of things. So simply join in with that to offer your service. And then offer your service as an individual to anyone who particularly comes to your attention as someone to serve. So we, as Swami Prabhupada said, sustain and comfort those people to whom you come into contact with that need sustenance or comfort. Sustain and comfort. And so we can offer ourselves in that way. But you're absolutely right, Marlo, that people who are in desperate circumstances, they're not yet ready to start this process. You're talking, yes, I'm talking about people who are growing up in a relatively stable environment that allows them to transition into that period of self-discovery and become self-sufficient, and so establish, as I said, unfold a career and perhaps have a successful marriage in which they have one or more children that they raise, and all of that entails. But you're absolutely right. Those people who are suffering, there are organizations that we can join if we're moved to help with that particular kind of suffering. And there are always individuals in our lives that can benefit if we sustain and comfort them. Thank you, Marla. You're absolutely right. Anything else about self-discovery or self-actualization?
Brother Shankara, this is Haima.
Yes, Haima?
Yes, I truly agree with you. Self-discovery period is the one. Our parents are our universe. We learn a lot from home. If we don't have a balance there, and then it's harder to move towards the other periods. Self-actualization and self-realization can be tougher. The childhood time and up to 30 years of age, whatever we learned at home, if the home environment is not balanced, then it gets very difficult. So,
yes, well, one of our birthrights, you're absolutely right. One of our birthrights is this education from our parents and other loving people in our youth. But we have to realize that by and large, what they are passing along is ignorance.
Yes.
It's not knowledge in the deeper sense.
So
they give us a membership.
What they need.
That leads to, as Uma said, questioning.
Yes.
So much of what they said, it seems, as we hit 18 years old and then up through 30 years old, so much of what they said seems like a limitation.
Yes.
And something in us says, I'm not limited. Why this limitation?
We have to take what they tell us, and then we have to test them in the world, which works, which doesn't. Drop some of those, like you said, the internal, outer, external impurities, and then pick up.
Yes.
That strength comes from the self-discovery area.
We need to dispel our ignorance.
Exactly.
Including the ignorance that was passed along by our well-meaning, loving parents, relatives, friends of our parents, and so on. And sometimes they pass along deeper and more unpleasant kinds of ignorance.
That's true.
And so we have to struggle out from behind that. So thank you, Haima. That's absolutely right. Anything else from anyone before we go on?
Brother Shankar?
Yes, Bhagarat.
I know the discussion is getting prolonged, but I was also thinking that the self-discovery, actualization, etc., they are not chronological process. In the sense, it's not up to a particular age, you learn this, and then you go to this, the way you wish it was there, but it was not that way, because primarily the childhood is what I call a period of inoculation. Inoculation means you instill different ideas, different thoughts, different emotions, different directives, different motives, different ambitions, and that is a time where the brain is growing the most, and therefore it's very sensitive to what is the brain exposed at that time. And like you said, the parents sometimes, although traditionally we always respect them, but actually they actually contaminate that particular period.
Oh, you're so right.
Because no parents are educated to be parents once they become parents.
No. And oftentimes it is the most well-meaning parents who provide us with the most difficult situation to work ourselves out of.
We
Because
well-meaning
they're
parents,
insistent on the truths of the membership that they're giving us.
well-meaning parents is also a very ambiguous term. You may mean very well, but if you really mean very well, then you will find out what is the best for child, which you do not do that. I will tell you what is good for you. That is how we raise the children.
Yes.
But the good part of India was that the children were being grown into a joint family. So it was not entirely the parents' dominance in the development of the child. Either uncle, distant uncle, your neighbor, it was a joint society. So somebody will compensate for the deficiencies and the child will be all right. But what about the chromosomal factors? For example, Shankara and Buddha, right from early on, their chromosomes were quite different. Their absorption of what they see around the world was quite different. Their compassion was automatically built. They didn't have to be given that one. They understood. But when that is absent, that is where the role of parents, teacher, everything comes to decide which particular course this child will take now when he develops into an adult.
Yes, in the scriptures, we find the idea of the ever-free soul,
Yes.
a Shankara, a Buddha, all right? That's how they don't come into this world with the limitations, the imprisonment that most of us do. They don't bear the burden of ignorance that most of us do. So, is there anything else before we go ahead? This is good. Thank you, Bhagirath. Absolutely, what you said is true. And it's good to parse these things out. So let me repeat this prayer that we may come to as, however we may phrase it or say it for ourselves. Hello? Someone mute themselves, please. Someone mute. Hello? Thank you. How they can be listening to that and this at the same time is a puzzle to me. So this is a plea for the blessing and cooperation of your inner guide, the Atman, so that you may pursue self-realization. You've come to, in your self-actualization, you've come to the conclusion that there is much more, and that you know you need resources that are not going to come from your left mind. So you apply to the divine presence, our inner guide, called the Atman by Sri Krishna. You are the source of infinite energy. Fill me with that energy. You are the source of inner strength. Endow me with that strength. You are the source of infinite courage. Inspire me with that courage. You are the source of infinite fortitude. Grant me that fortitude. Now, that's a pretty good hand, that's a pretty good hand to play from if you have the blessing of your inner guide to give you those attributes. So let's take up self-realization. In 1896, Swami Vivekananda wrote, "Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free." This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. I'm going to read that again because this is the best summary that I have found of what it is that spiritual life and spiritual practice is about. Each soul is potentially divine. It doesn't mean that it might be and it's not yet. What it means is that it's potential like there's energy in a battery. But if we just see this battery, if we don't know what it is and what it's for and that we have to connect it to something, we don't know there's energy in that battery. That's how our soul is. It is potential. The truth of our divinity is potential like that energy in a battery. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. Swami Vivekananda came to the West to teach us these profound truths. He yearned for you to access your illimitable source of knowledge, the illimitable source of knowledge within yourself, your everlasting birthright, and manifest your innate divinity. Karma Yoga, the yoga of selfish, Karma Yoga, the yoga of selfless action, is one gateway to your birthright, one path by which we can overcome the world, both external and internal. By the world is meant the same thing as the Swami means by nature. We can take the inner, subtle knowledge gained by Karma Yoga's practices and turn it into ever more perfect action in the world. We can take the inner, subtle knowledge gained by Karma Yoga's practices and turn it into ever more perfect action in the world. As Swami Swahananda, the teacher, the Swami who sent me here, as Swami Swahananda often said, the only true measure of spiritual progress is change in behavior. This overcoming of nature, internal and external, results in changes in behavior. This, according to the Swami, is the only true measure of spiritual progress. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the Master says, "What is beyond speech and mind is born in the flesh, assuming various forms and engaging in various activities." It comes to offer us what is prayed for in that prayer: strength, fortitude, courage, energy. So the Master goes on, "How long should a man perform his duties? As long as he has not attained God. Duties drop away after the realization of God. Then one goes beyond good and evil. The flower drops off as soon as the fruit appears. The flower serves the process. The flower serves the purpose of begetting the fruit. But he who has attained perfection, realized God, cannot commit sin. An expert singer cannot sing a false note." Now I'm going to read you again what the Master says. This is in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. What is beyond speech and mind is born in the flesh, assuming various forms and engaging in various activities. The highest of those forms is, of course, Ishvara Ishwari, the creator, sustainer, and transformer or destroyer of the universe. But it also lives in each of us as what is called the Atman. That is one of its forms, and it engages there in various activities. Though Atman is identical with Brahman, Brahman has two phases, there are two ways of being with Brahman. There is Brahman the still, the activeless, the attributeless, Nirguna Brahman, and then there is Brahman the active, the manifest, Saguna Brahman. This is the Atman within us. This is why Krishna says that the body that you have, the body, mind, intellect complex that you have, this action and experience suit, was created by the Atman for its own purposes. And its experiencing of our perceptions and our actions sanctions them. So this is what is meant by what is beyond speech and mind is born in the flesh, assuming various forms and engaging in various activities. How long should a man perform his duties? In other words, how long do you continue with your swadharma? How long should a man perform his duties? As long as he has not attained God. Duties drop away after the realization of God. Then one goes beyond good and evil. The flower drops off as soon as the fruit appears. The flower serves the purpose of begetting the fruit. So self-discovery and self-actualization, your flowering, serves to beget the fruit of your self-realization. But one who has attained perfection, realized God, cannot commit sin. In other words, you stop generating karma in any sense. An expert singer cannot sing a false note. He also said an expert dancer cannot take a false or make a false step. So this is a very short summary of the Master's take on Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. If you would like to hear the Master's most complete explanation of Karma Yoga, read chapter 3 of his Gospel. The title of that chapter is Visit to Vidyasagar. Many of you know Vidyasagar. He was a great Bengali soul, a philanthropist, an educator, a scholar, a great soul. Sri Ramakrishna went to visit him, and chapter 3 of the Gospel is the record of that visit. Because Vidyasagar was such a great karma yogi, Sri Ramakrishna addresses what it means to take karma yoga and make it a pathway to realization. For your convenience, a PDF of chapter 3 will be posted along with the notes for this talk on the center's website at the latest Thursday of next week. So the notes for this talk and the talk itself as an audio and video will be posted on the website under our media archives, in our media archives, along with the usual notes for the talk and the talk itself in video and audio form. There will be a PDF of chapter 3 so that you can download it and read it. if you don't have a copy of the gospel that you prefer to look at it through. So that's the talk for today. It's just coming up on noon, so we have time for comments and questions. Please, this is how we study the art of spirituality together. Let's share with one another who we are, what we heard, how it made us feel, what it gave rise to us in us, because this is good for the others that are here. To hear you say this, to hear you ask these questions. They may have the same question themselves, but are too shy to ask it. So those of you who have the boldness to share with us, and please be as bold as you can. We need this. This is part of what we're doing.
Hey, Brother Shankara.
Yes, James.
Yes, sir. Could you please elaborate a little bit more on what is meant by when an individual is self-realized? Did you say he eliminates karma or nullifies karma?
Stops making karma. They've already nullified through their spiritual practices. They've nullified the effects of their prior karma. As Holy Mother said, you become pure as a star. Your heart becomes pure, therefore you see God, you know God. And in that experience of knowing God, all of these karmas are reduced. As she said, if you were going to have a sword blow that would slash your leg, it isn't that nothing will happen, but you will have a pinprick. But when the Master says a self-realized human being is like an expert singer that cannot sing a false note, or an expert dancer that cannot make a false step, why is that? Because the music that the singer is singing or the dancer is dancing in, they no longer hear that music in the same way we do. The music becomes them.
Right.
And so when you know God, in that sense, you become God. And therefore you stop making karmas.
Yeah, I know that. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I know that, there's been times where people have been, in the past self-realized, truly self-realized, but sometimes their actions might, a common person might think, gosh, why is this person doing that if he's self-realized, So sometimes the actions don't really prove that an individual is self-realized, wouldn't you say?
No, what they prove, James, is that we don't understand what self-realization means. We don't understand what it is that they're doing. It's not
right.
that they never say, I am a realized soul. They never say any such thing.
No, that's true.
But Sri Ramakrishna says, and others say, other great souls say, there's no way for us to understand the actions of a realized soul. We don't understand where they're coming from. When they have dispelled all ignorance, they have no boundaries.
Yeah, and there's still karma, isn't there, as far as there's good and bad karma. So a self-realized person may do something and good might come out of it. That would still be karma, I would think.
Well, but it has nothing to do with them. It isn't that the karma benefits them. If it benefits anyone, it benefits all of humanity, and more particularly their disciples.
I see. Okay. That makes sense.
Some of the things that Saint Joan of Arc did, we'll never understand. And of course, the people in that time didn't understand. They burned her at the stake.
I'm not familiar with who she is.
Oh, she was the one who led one of the rebellions against the oppressors of her time. She's the Maid of Orleans, and if you want to know more, just look up Joan of Arc.
Okay.
And she was a remarkable soul. She had been a nun and became a knight. Knight. Fought in battle, defeated the enemy. But because of the things that she did and said, her own church burned her at the stake.
What was her name again? Joan?
Joan, Joan, Joan of Arc. A-R-C. Joan of Arc. Jeanne d'Arc. Maid of Orleans.
May I?
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry.
Oh, I just said thank you, brother.
Yeah. Okay, James. Go ahead, Uma.
James, if I may respond to your question.
Yes.
In Bhagavad Gita, if I'm not wrong, chapter 3 spells out the difference between karma and non-akarma. So there are some souls, although as Brother Shankar pointed out, that the truly realized souls come to a point when they don't need to work or be functioning in the world. However, there are examples of some saints who continue to function in the world or do whatever they used to do. However, the difference was that their karma did not bind them, because that is attachment. When do you acquire that bondage? You know, every karma binds you, right?
Yeah.
These are the realized souls who say, if they're teachers, they continue teaching, suppose. If you're farming, you continue farming. However, the difference between karma and akarma is that what you do does not bind you. That your actions are not selfish. They are for the good of others. It's your nature to do that. But you are not, caught up in your action.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Within the context of karma yoga, the kind of saint that Uma was pointing to that continues to work is an excellent example is Saint Francis de Sales. Francis, like Saint Francis, we're familiar with that, Francis. Lowercase, next word is lowercase d, lowercase e, Francis de, last word Sales, Sales, Saint Francis de Sales. He was a great karma yogi, as for that matter was Saint Francis of Assisi.
Yes.
But Francis de Sales is one that's easy to point to as someone who continued to work. Another is Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas. That spirit of Christmas continues to work in the world. I can tell you of my own personal experience. Saint Nicholas is a reality. You can read about what Saint Nicholas did after attaining sainthood during his own life, during the period that he was embodied. But that spirit of Christmas, that spirit that has become the spirit of Christmas, continues to exist and continues to work in the world. As does an aspect of the Buddha called Hotai, which is, there are a lot of similarities between Hotai, two words, Hotai. You can find an image of Hotai in a lot of Chinese restaurants. You're supposed to rub his belly for good luck. But if you look more carefully, you'll notice that either he has slung over his shoulder or beside him a sack. And it's like St. Nicholas's sack. It contains everything that you might ever want. So these great souls, they continue to act in the universe.
Jivan Mukta.
Jivan Mukta, yes, indeed. So anything else, my dears?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, please.
I'm going to tap into my boldness.
Okay, please do, dear.
So I suppose the chronology of these stages is not necessarily defined by one lifetime. And, especially for believers of rebirth. And so it may take several births to go from one stage to the other, from, self-development to actualization and realization.
Is that a question?
Yes.
The avatars come, the incarnations come to offer us the possibility of doing it in one lifetime. If we accept their invitation, we take refuge in them and in their teachings. But most particularly, we take refuge in them. The Atman wants, like an artesian well that is covered up, and so just a trickle of water is coming out in the metaphor that Sri Ramakrishna used. If that artesian well is uncovered, it bursts forth and utterly transforms you. Which is why Sri Krishna says, turn to me in utter devotion, I see no sinner. In other words, your karmas are no longer relevant. I see no sinner. Holiness itself shall transform you. Now, of course, we must continuously, day in and day out, accept the invitation to that transformation. As Arjuna points out, we can turn away, we can fall away from yoga, and therefore take more than one lifetime, and Krishna explains that as well. But Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Vivekananda, Raja Maharaj were all adamant that it need not take more than one lifetime. This lifetime is enough. And it doesn't matter when you start. You don't have to start when you're 18 or 25 or 45. Anytime you start is the perfect time. This again, Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother were adamant about this. When you start is the perfectly right time. So yes, it can take several lifetimes, and Holy Mother did remark about some of her own disciples, that their immersion in ignorance, though they had come to her for initiation and became her disciple, a particular individual or three, that they would require another lifetime or two. But it would happen under her protection. And she didn't name these people. She simply said, yes, there were some people that would take another lifetime or two. But these realized souls, Ramana Maharshi, and this is said to be a true story. I wasn't there, so I can't tell you of my own experience, but it's said to be a true story. Ramana Maharshi gave liberation to his cow. This is the power of one who has become omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, which is what the realized soul becomes. This is why they're called saints and why they perform, quote, miracles, unquote. They're not miracles at all. They're just, they now have the power of control over Maya within certain limits. They can't create or destroy the universe itself. So if we take refuge in a realized soul, if we truly take refuge, which is what Sri Krishna means by turn to me in utter devotion, no reservations, no holding back, no keeping one foot on the other side of the fence. Their power is unlimited. So does that answer it?
Very well. Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Okay, good. Anything else? This is wonderful.
Brother Shankar?
Yes, Bhagarat.
There are a few questions that strike my mind when we...
Why am I not surprised, Bhagarat? This is your absolute specialty. Wonderful. Go right ahead. This is what this is all about.
I was thinking about the life of Krishna. Krishna, the human. I'm not talking about the Krishna the way we understand. He's gone through the same thing. All the three stages that you are describing, if you trace his life history, it will be evident that he has rapidly gone through that one and enhanced the upliftment of the life to a soul form. But in the last part of life of Krishna, which is not highlighted as much by the Hindus, he saw everything that he had done was going down the drain.
Yes.
He had established Golden Dwarika. That Golden Dwarika at that time was very comparable to what this United States was 100 years back.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, things went wrong.
Oh, yes.
It started downing. People started being demoralized. And at that time, Krishna has completely kept himself at a distance. He doesn't seem to have a documented evidence of intervening again and say, no, I will save you. I'm raising this question because we are at the same juncture in this country right now.
It was the end of the Bronze Age. It was the end of the Bronze Age. The Avatar had given us what we needed for the Kali Yuga, the Iron Age. There was nothing more for him to do. So his clan came to pieces. They fought with one another. Dwarka was drowned. Everything he had created came to bits. You're absolutely right, Bhagarat.
So if that is how it is, what should be our attitude now, the way we see this country going down the drain?
What did Rama say when Sita told him, Rama, you have the power to make every home in Ayodhya a mansion? He said, what would the Masons do? We don't understand. We don't understand what's going on, Bhagarat. The best we can do, the very best we can do, is to be as realized as we can, to be as much a beacon of truth and integrity and love and compassion as we can.
Yeah.
That's the only thing we can do. What did Ramana Maharshi say? The greatest gift you can give the world is to understand who you truly are. So if we get demoralized or despair, and it's easy, oh God, it's so horrible out there. This is such a dreadful transformation we're going through. But if we give in to despair, dejection, depression, then our light is simply hidden. And it isn't like we're doing anything wrong, but it is a sadness. So the best we can do is manifest as much integrity and truth and love and compassion as we can. As many of the attributes of the Satyug that we can, where all four pillars of Dharma are restored. Try and manifest that. Sri Ramakrishna said that the greatest austerity of this age is truth. Of this time is to manifest truth.
And last question, and then I'll not ask anything more. You said that when Vivekananda came into United States, the country was different, the need of the country was different, the spiritual needs of this country was different. And therefore, he said, don't worry about anything else because the country is managing itself very well. There is someone who's taking care of the deceased, there is someone who's taking care of the needs, there is someone who's going to feed, there is someone who's going to give houses, etc., etc. Therefore, he taught Vedanta to this country. That was something that you said. So now my hypothetical question, if Vivekananda comes now, and if he sees the same America, what will be his reaction? What will be his way of ending?
Oh my, Bhagirath. It is indeed a hypothetical question. What I would have to have Vivekananda's vision, his knowledge, his understanding to say what he would say now. And I don't have that. All I can tell you is what I just said. We can be as serviceful as we have the time and the motivation and the energy for. There are so many ways to be serviceful. I mean, just pick a subject and you'll find that there is a 501c3 devoted to it. So go, give your energy, give your money. I mean, but what Vivekananda would say now, I can't tell you. One thing I would say is don't cooperate. I can be sure he would say don't cooperate with the evil. But how much he would say to be indifferent to it, I don't know. It's a very good question, one worth meditating on, to see if Vivekananda won't give us the answer himself. Because he hasn't gone anywhere either. There are many, including myself, who can say Vivekananda lives. He is available to us. So if the question burns in you, Bhagirath, and it well may burn in you, what would you say now, Swamiji? Ask him and see if you don't get an answer. Thank you for asking. Anyone else, dears?
I think, good morning, Brother Shankara.
Good morning, Balakrishna.
I think with my little knowledge, Vivekananda would say, hey, do karma yoga with understanding.
Well, yes, he would say that. I have no doubt. Nothing that has happened has any way changed that couple of paragraphs that I read from him about each of us is potentially divine. And he named the four yogas without saying them by name. Work, karma yoga, worship, bhakti yoga, psychic control, raja yoga, philosophy, jnana yoga. He said, take one or more or all four of these and be free. So nothing has changed from that. The imperative is for us to know God. Then we will be the one who cannot sing a false note, who cannot put a foot wrong. So if we choose to accept it, our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to be what Vivekananda said in that paragraph. So that hasn't changed. And definitely he would emphasize karma yoga, no doubt. And so any selfless action that we perform, anything that we do for others, anything that is, and particularly if we can do it without any attachment to the fruits or results, not for name or fame or recognition in any way, just because we know it will be of service to the individual human being as Shiva, serving the Jiva as Shiva.
Shankara, this is
Yes.
Rita.
Hello, Rita.
Since we are speaking about service, I came across a verse from the Kathopanishad, and the translation is from Swami Prabhavananda. And the goal you have described as self-realization. So of that goal, which all the Vedas declare, which is implicit in all penances, and in pursuit of which men lead lives of continence and service, of that will I briefly speak. It is the Om. And then he goes on to say, Swamiji says, the Om, this Brahman, this self, deep hidden in all beings, is not revealed to all, but to the seers. Pure in heart, concentrated in mind, to them is he revealed. The senses of the wise man obey his mind obeys his intellect obeys his ego, and his ego obeys the self. Arise, awake, approach the feet of the master, and know that, like the sharp edge of a razor, the sages say, is the path. Narrow it is and difficult to tread. And Swami Vivekananda, of course, has quoted from this verse, arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached.
Which is his challenge to all of us. But it's an invitation as much as it is a challenge. It's an invitation. It's not a compulsion. It's an invitation in the form of a challenge. We are asked. And you know, we're coming, there's this aspect to what's going on right now. You know, the Katha Upanishad was Swami Vivekananda's favorite. And everything that we have is a product of Kali Yuga. Everything. We have no recorded history other than something that the anthropologists may guess at from some time before. The archaeologists and the anthropologists. We have nothing but what is a product of the Kali Yuga. So these challenges that are thrown up to us, if we say that the one who came to signal the end of the Kali Yuga, which is by his own testimony, by Holy Mother's testimony, and by Vivekananda's testimony, it's Sri Ramakrishna came. That signals the end of the Kali Yuga. Now, how long will this take? According to Vivekananda, he said, I have given them enough for 1,500 years. That is a clue that the Kali Yuga will not be over like flipping a light switch. That isn't how things happen in the universe. It will die away over the next, for us, perhaps 1,300 years, since it's been a couple of hundred years since the Master came. Nearly a couple of hundred years. 1836. So it's up to us to take this invitation. What does it say? Breaker of this world's chain. Sri Ramakrishna came to break this world's chain. If we take any hold upon God in our prayer, it is by thy grace alone, since all thine austerities were practiced for our sake. How great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. So if we accept that invitation, if we accept Sri Ramakrishna's invitation to take refuge in him, you know, I don't normally preach Sri Ramakrishna as such, but there it is in Om Ring Ritam and in Breaker of This World's Chain. Sri Ramakrishna gave us the opportunity to get off the train before it enters the Satyug. Now, the Satyug is a wonderful, wonderful thing, but it is also very, very difficult to achieve liberation during the Satyug. Great inconceivable penances are the means for your realization. Great inconceivable penances. So Sri Ramakrishna came and did those great inconceivable penances for us and offers us his hand. So we can accept or not. If we do not, we risk. This goes to Swayam's question, her comment. We risk being, for a very long time, many, many lifetimes, in the Satyug. Now, the Satyug is metaphorized in the Judeo-Christian scriptures, I believe, as the Garden of Eden. So it's definitely not some place that you would want to avoid unless you're just tired of being incarnated. As Sri Chaitanya said, bathing in his name, that bath for weary souls. Because Sri Chaitanya was the first that we know of who preached what was at the end of the 15 prophecies about the Kali Yuga that are in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's 15 prophecies about the nature of the Kali Yuga. At the end, it says, but there's one glory about the Kali Yuga, that the veil of ignorance is very black, but it's so thin that it can be dispelled by only chanting the name of the Lord and his glories or her glories. This is not true of the other ages of the universe. It's what it says. Again, this is repeating what I've read, I've heard. So we have the ability to focus on our inner self and say, this is who I really am. And this embodiment, this being a creature of the gunas. And again, if you wish to understand what's meant by that, read chapters 2 and 3 of the Gita. Sri Krishna says explicitly, you think you're the doer, you're not the doer. It's the gunas that are the doer. You are the Atman, you are the witness. The witness is the face of the Atman. So you can identify with this guna-made and guna-activated machine, or you can identify with who you truly are. The choice is ours. And has been pointed out over and over, it's conceptually simple, but it is anything but easy to dispel the ignorance that continues to cause us to feel, I am this body, this mind, this intellect, this doing. Which is why Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, Vivekananda and Raja Maharaj and the others of what the master called his band of minstrels came to share with us the fact that they have overcome the world and can help us overcome the world as well. And it's a choice. If the yearning is in you, nurture it. Daily, blow on that coal. Your spiritual practice is blowing on that coal so that the yearning, in Sanskrit, mumukshatvam, grows and grows until you cannot bear it anymore. You have to break through. And this is where all of those, Bhagirath mentioned Adi Shankaracharya and Gautama Buddha. These awakened ones, the only reason they stick around, the only reason they come is to share with us their spiritual treasure. And the prayer, when I said that Vivekananda yearned, I mean, if you read his letters, if you read his talks, we're going to start studying Jnana Yoga next Wednesday. Just see the nature of his yearning, how badly he wanted to communicate what he had realized as he sat on that rock in Thousand Island Park in June of 1895. By the time he got to London in the fall of 1895, he was spouting the truth, giving himself day in and day out classes and classes and talks and talks. The cyclonic monk, as the St. Louis paper called him at the time. His yearning was so great that he simply burnt himself up to share with us what Sri Ramakrishna had given him. So it's will we do the work? There's no foul. You're not wrong if you don't. But if you don't, as Swami Vijnanananda said to someone to whom he'd given instructions, and the young man asked, well, Swami, what happens if I don't follow your instructions? If I don't do what you said? The Swami paused a moment, thought about it, and said, well, what would have happened will not happen. So we have all of these, we have all of the Shravana we need. We have all of the hearing and the reading that we need. So then it's up to us to do the manana, to take it inside, to assimilate it, make it a reality for ourselves, and pray for release, if that's what we want. Any other comments or questions?
Just one little addition.
Yes, Uma.
Brother Shankar, as I think of what we are all going through right now, that prayer, Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya, please lead me from untruth to truth. That prayer, each of the lines, no other prayer works for me as much as this prayer does. And it's so pertinent to our times today. From untruth, all this misery and death and climate change and you name everything. Please, God, help me now find the truth beyond this untruth and darkness to light. And the last one, from death to immortality.
Yes.
And what could be more applicant, so powerful in these times?
Yes.
That death is all around, dancing around us. And we have to learn, to overcome that and go to our source for comfort.
If any of you would like to read something very inspiring that is exactly what Uma was talking about, it's an article by Uma on, it's just this defiant challenge to what's happening, the virus and all that it entails. It says, it need not conquer us, we can conquer it. And it's in the latest edition of American Vedantist, which you can find at americanvedantist.org, all one string of letters, americanvedantist.org, and then look for Uma's article on the spiritual approach to the coronavirus. Very strong, very inspiring article that is just exactly what she was saying. And yes, Uma, that prayer ends with lead us from death to immortality. Death means rebirth. That's what Krishna says in the Gita.
Yes.
Those who die will be reborn. If you become immortal, you no longer die. You're beyond death. And this is not unique. It comes with each of the great teachers. What did Christ say? Those who drink from my mouth shall not taste death. This is what he said to the woman at the well when he asked her for a drink of water. And she said, well, how can I, a Samaritan woman, give you, a Jew, a drink? And he explained to her why that was perfectly all right. And then he said, those who drink from my mouth shall not taste death. So we've been left the instructions over and over by so many. Are we going to listen now? It's not compulsory, but it certainly is an invitation that we might want to consider. Again, it's in the Upanishads, it's in Christ's teachings. The master of the house invites one friend to come to the feast. And they say, oh, I'm doing a house deal, I can't come tonight. And he invites another and they make some other excuse. and he sends his servants to invite another, and they make some other excuse. And so finally the master of the house says to his servant, just go out in the street and invite anybody that you meet. And so that's what Christ did. When he was asked, why do you spend so much time with the publicans and the sinners? He said, because they're the ones who need me. And so, do we need him or not? Do we need Sri Ramakrishna, Rama, Krishna, Buddha? It's up to us. It's up to us.
And who are these people in the gospel to point out to Christ that he's with sinners? I mean, are they so high and mighty that they can cast down other people for their sin? Well,
no, that's what he says. He says to them, you who are without sin, cast the first stone. In that particular instance, he also said to those who were shaming him in that way, he said, look, you have the keys to the kingdom, and you neither use them nor do you share them. Shame on you. That's what he said to the Pharisees. So they were the ones in control at that time. So it's our grace to be together this way this morning, now this afternoon. It's such a great grace that we come together this way to hear these things, to encourage one another, to know that there are this screenful and more of people who are yearning in this direction. How gratifying that is. How supportive. So let us compassionately love one another and pray for one another's success in whatever direction our heart wants to go. Because it is our heart we should listen to, not our mind. Vivekananda said, when it comes to the question of an argument between the mind and the heart, go with the heart. So wherever our heart draws us, and if you want to understand what is meant by the heart, I really do recommend that you read that book by Jill Bolte Taylor, My Stroke of Insight. I mean, it's there in the scriptures, it's there in the hymns of Swami Abhedananda, it's there in so many places, but she explains it in a way that is unique. I wouldn't recommend it to you if I didn't believe in it so strongly. And if you want a copy, all you have to do is email me. I'll email you back a PDF copy. You don't even have to buy it. Though the Kindle edition is there and the print edition is there inexpensively. I've seen it for as little as $0.10 plus shipping, $4.19 by the time, or $4.09 by the time you finish paying for it. But if you want a PDF copy, just email me and I'll send you one. It really explains what's meant by what's resident in the heart. You can also go to her TED Talk about it. It's just 20 minutes, but it'll floor you. Aaron Shippey was here the other night. We watched it together. It sure made his eyes pop open. So, anything else from anyone?
Hi, I have one more question I want to ask.
Yes, Marla, dear.
About the Navratri, the chanting. I want to participate, but I'm quite a newbie, and I need some guidance.
Okay, it's as simple as can be. You simply sit and you chant, and you time this. If you chant it fairly like if you chant Jai Shri Durga, Jai Shri Durga, Jai Shri Durga, Jai Shri Durga, you're doing about 1 a second. So 60 a minute, 300 in 5 minutes, so on. So just say, I think I can do this many minutes a day. And then just email me your pledge for however many minutes you think you can do for each of those 10 days. And then if you fall behind, you can make it up the next day. There's no harm, no foul. Just get your pledge done by the end of the 10 days. So if you pledge, say you pledge $5,500, 500 a day. That's less than 10 minutes. You know, then that's what you do. You just sit, and for that number of minutes, you for 500 seconds a day, you sit and chant Jai Shri Durga, in addition to whatever spiritual practice you're doing. It doesn't replace your spiritual practice. It's in addition.
So the question is, I don't want to over-promise. What's a realistic, as a relative newbie chanter? I mean, I am familiar, I have some practice, but I don't know what's a realistic amount.
I made a couple of suggestions, 500 a day. Can you do less than 10 minutes a day? Can you sit somewhere quietly for less than 10 minutes a day? And I mean, 10 minutes is
okay. Sounds good.
Okay, so just email me. Anybody else that wants to participate, just email me with your pledge. Starting on the 17th, you start on October 17th, and you do it every day through October 26th. And as I said, if you miss a day for some reason, an emergency, ill health, whatever, something disallows it, then make it up a little bit over the next several days. It's really quite, you'll find it quite enjoyable. Mother's name is power. It's power itself. Durga is if you read the Chandi, it'll make your head spin what the name Durga is.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Don't you think that the Chandi is at work right now in our world?
Oh, this looks like the opening of another chapter of the Chandi, and it's, if you look at
many different sources, she's at work right now. That's how I feel, right?
You talk about multiplying your own form into many.
Yes, yes.
Mother has multiplied herself into that virus.
Into many. Thank you.
If we believe it, if we believe that Mother is the reality,
I truly believe
it can only be true that she has multiplied her own form into many in this transformative way as the virus. That's what the Chandi would indicate beyond a shadow of a doubt. And as we chant her name, as we do this, we are lessening the negative effects and increasing the positive effects. That is to say, that because of the power of Mother's name being manifest in this way, more people will see the necessity of becoming adaptable rather than obstinate in the face of the virus. So there's a real benefit to the world in chanting Mother's name over the next the days between this, any time at all, for that matter. But there's something special about the time of Durga Puja Navaratri. There's a window that opens. Anything else, my dears? All right. Well, we'll call it a day then. Somehow the little thing that says end this session is gone. I don't see it. Well,
you did not say the last prayer, and therefore
no, I haven't. I was just looking for the button. Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. May that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. And so, until next time, dears. The next time would be tomorrow evening, if you choose to join us for the reading and discussion group of the book Love Poems from God. And then there's the Tuesday night class on Holy Mother, the life of Holy Mother. And then on Wednesday night, we will take up Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga. And I think that's the 6th. I said the 8th. I think it's the 6th. All right, dears. Wait a minute. No, Tuesday's the 6th, isn't it?
7th.
Tomorrow's the 5th, 6th. 7th would be the 7th.
7th.
Duh. Time has never been my strongest suit. So, until next time, dears.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Bye-bye, dears. I don't know where that little button that says end the session is.
Stop video at the left side.
No. That's stopping my video. That's stop. It's not, thank you, though. Well, I'm just going to have to turn it off, dears. I don't know how to end the session any other way. Bye-bye, everyone. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga.
Shankara,
Yes, dear.
is your the whole Zoom window, is it did it get smaller? I mean, can you make it bigger? Like go up to the upper left where there's the red, little red thing, little red circle, little yellow one and little green one,
Yeah, which one do I click?
Click the green one, which is the one on the right.
Green one.
Further up. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, that's what I thought. Maybe it had just
Oh,
hit.
yeah. What I did is I slid it too far to the right.
Okay. Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Cindy.
Yes. Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Shankara.
Thank you, dear.